Fight!
It's 1993 and over 2 years on from its arcade release and some 18 months after the Super Nintendo port, Sega fans finally had a port of Street Fighter II, the sensational one-on-one fighting game that changed the video game industry, based on the latest and greatest Hyper Fighting Edition. You open up your copy of your favourite Sega magazine to read the review and there's a new arcade version? That's right. Special Champion Edition hadn't even reached store shelves by the time Super Street Fighter II The New Challengers had hit arcades. Now powered by the CPS2 arcade board, it featured 4 new characters, new moves, redrawn animations and high quality audio. The next generation Capcom board powering Super would deliver classic fighters from now until the end of the millennium, so how would it even be possible for the humble Mega Drive to do this massive game justice? Let's find out. Special Champion Edition was an outstanding port of Street Fighter II, and in my opinion, it was the best version of Street Fighter II in the home at that point. But even that had suffered cutbacks. Animation was cut, most notably backwards walking animations for all characters, which was particularly noticeable for Blanka. Resolution was lower, there was less detail, lower quality music, and the infamous downgrade in voice samples. And that was compared to the CP System 1 hardware. The brand new CP System 2 was a generational leap over the first, and while Super Street Fighter 2 wasn't the visual tour de force that you'd see later on in the likes of Street Fighter Alpha 3 or Marvel vs Capcom in the board's later years, it was born from the same hardware. As such, the improvements are often subtle but numerous. While character sprites appear mostly the same at a glance, they have been redrawn, recoloured and enhanced with new animation frames. Those animations aren't all just superficial. All characters featured some new attack animations, with Balrog, Vega and Sagat receiving new attacks to add variety to their kicks and punches, Chun-Li also getting a fresh new Kikosha animation, and Ken's flaming Dragon Punch. Sounds were completely redone in fabulous Q sound. So music, effects and voice work were all given a crisp new update. Super was indeed a super-sized Street Fighter game in every respect, yet almost as soon as the arcade version had dropped, both Sega and Nintendo fans were dreaming of ports to their 16-bit consoles. Could it be done? Well, of course it could. We'd seen ports of Mortal Kombat to 8-bit machines at that point in the same period, an arcade title arguably as impressive as the CPS2's debut title, though ports to even the 16-bit consoles had been severely cut down. So the question was, much like Mortal Kombat on those systems, what would be the cost? Would Super Street Fighter II make it to the Sega Genesis and Sega Mega Drive content complete? Or was it too big for Sega's 16-bit console? Well, yes. Hang on, you say. Yes to what? Well, yes to both. Let me explain. Porting Super Street Fighter II to Sega's 16-bit console, content complete, would be near impossible for a standard game cartridge at that time. The challenge that Capcom faced was that the final ROM's game size was a huge, at the time, 40 megabits, which was a problem when the Mega Drive could only access a ROM size that was 32 megabits safely. As a result, Capcom built a proprietary bank switching mapper to allow this larger than normal cartridge size to exist. So what do Sega owners get? Loading up Super Street Fighter II, you get the brand new arcade intro as Ryu hurls a fireball at you. And if you jump straight into the arcade mode, you get your 8 World Warriors from the first Street Fighter II game, the 4 Grand Master bosses and, most importantly, the 4 new challengers. You have Fei Long, the martial arts film expert star from Hong Kong, who looks nothing like Bruce Lee. What are you talking about? You have DJ, who is the feel-good Jamaican kickboxer. You have T-Hawk, which is short for Thunderhawk, the gigantic Native American who hails from Mexico and is another with M. Bison on their revenge list. And speaking of revenge against gaming's most evil train conductor, Cammy is a British Special Forces member with amnesia and ties to Bison himself. They complement the original cast well, and they are well balanced, and this does feel like a natural upgrade. At the time, I'm pretty sure we all just wanted a Street Fighter 3 after 3 years of Street Fighter 2 updates, but Super felt like it would be just enough to tide us over for a while. Apart from one thing, the arcade version was really slow. Thankfully, the 16-bit ports addressed that. Once you get past the intro, pressing right on the D-pad allows you to select a speed via the familiar star gauge, bringing the speed of the game back up to hyper fighting levels. Gotta go fast, am I right? So yes, you have all the characters from the arcade game, you have the stunning arcade intro of Ryu throwing a fireball in your face, you have all the moves, most of the animations, including the new ones and all the other little accoutrements that make this feel like the arcade experience. Now, I'm not going to do a face-off because, let's be honest, it's been done to death. But to demonstrate how the Sega port attempted to squeeze the whole arcade game into the cart that was, quite literally, still too big for the system, it's worth comparing the feature set to the Super Nintendo version. The Mega Drive port has more voice clips, with things such as the round number being announced in that version and not in the Nintendo port.
Round 1, fight!
The Sega version also has uncensored, bloodied character portraits, which were censored and replaced with sweat in the Super Nintendo version. It even has music that fully loops between rounds, which was something the arcade version had, but no other console version did. The music even speeds up when one character's health is low, which is kinda like what the arcade did, and gave you the feeling of urgency for that same scenario, but was still unique to the Mega Drive version. But the biggest disparity in content is the endings, where the Sega version has far more character scenes than the Super Nintendo version, which just recycles the game's graphics. So yes, when we say it is content complete, it pretty much is. Everything the arcade version has, aside from some animations, the Sega version features. But that's not to say that everything here is perfect. I've already mentioned that the animation was cut slightly, which is most evident in the backwards walking animations and in the continue screen via the animated portraits that aren't animated in the Sega version. But there are nips and tucks everywhere. As you'd expect from squashing a near 100 megabit game into just 40 megs on the Sega Mega Drive, there are some other notable compromises. This was a brand new arcade board in 1993, porting its big debut title to a home console that was 5 years old at the time, so things go much further than just a few cut animation frames. The first thing that jumps out is the drop in colour. Now this was something that was increasingly common in arcade ports as the age of the Mega Drive went on, and while Sega's 16-bit console handles itself well in most circumstances, Special Champion Edition being one such example, here the loss in colour is felt much harder than most. And although I've seen some online say that they prefer the simpler, more bold colour palette, I have to say that I'm just not as impressed. Resolution also takes a hit just like the previous game, though it looks about the same as Special Champion Edition in that respect, even though Capcom claimed to have built this port of the game from the ground up. But the biggest hit is in the sound department. The scratchy voices of the previous ports return with a vengeance here, and even though there's more speech here, from the fighter names and round numbers right down to the different pitch for Ken's voice clips, it's as bad, if not worse, than before.
Round 2, fight!
This is coupled with much less authentic music in terms of instrumentation and quality. The Mega Drive had no chance of replicating the Q-Sound powered CPS2 cabinet, so it goes hard on synth heavy interpretations of those themes. The results are mixed to bad, and you'd have to be a crazy fan of that specific Mega Drive sound to actually prefer it to the original.
Round 1, fight!
Sadly, these are all areas where the Super Nintendo port thrives, the sampled sounds, the clear speech, and while Nintendo's reverb machine turns in some subpar interpretations itself, Zangief's for example sounding weaker than ever, it beats the boxer shorts off the Mega Drive version when it comes to sound overall. The same can be said for use of colour, which looks far closer to the stunning arcade original on Nintendo's machine. In my special Champion Edition video, I regaled how I loved the Sega port of Street Fighter 2 and how it was the best version of its time, how it plays, looks and sounds more authentic than any other version of the era. For Super, the results are far more mixed, the colour changes are more noticeable and the sound is worse. However, the gameplay is still absolutely nailed on. Every move from the arcade, every combo, it's all here in all its glory. Not only is it content complete, unlike the Super Nintendo version, but it has additional features above and beyond the arcade. It features not only a versus mode, but the group battle modes from the previous Mega Drive game. There's also challenge modes, which take the form of time attack and score challenges. Finally, the options mode has an expert setting, which drops the bonus stages and ensures that the player must fight all 16 Street Fighters before the credits roll. A great addition and one that remains exclusive to this version of the game. The problem for me at the time was that by the time new challenges hit the UK shop shelves, I had been playing the previous entry pretty much non-stop. For me, and it seems much of the game in press, it wasn't quite worth the £60 entry fee if you had the prior game. As a result, something else caught my eye. Yes, Mortal Kombat 2, offering a substantial improvement over the game from the previous year, adding 7 new playable characters, new stages, new bosses and new finishing moves completely stole me away from Super Street Fighter 2. And it wasn't just me. MK2 outsold both Super Street Fighter 2 and its Special Champion Edition sibling. In hindsight, I can see it both ways. Mortal Kombat was fresher, newer and certainly not an enhancement of a game that came to arcades 3 years ago at this point and home consoles over 2 years ago. However, Super Street Fighter 2 is still an all-time great. It plays fantastically and, as I keep saying, it's content complete, which is more than you could say for the version on its rival system, with missing sound and visual effects as well as more frequent slowdown. Now if only it wasn't for those colour and sound issues, eh? Well, worry not, the Sega homebrew scene is here to the rescue. Lord Hiryu, as he has done with so many others, blessed us with his work on Super Street Fighter 2 on the Sega Mega Drive. With enriched colours, clearer sound and a few other nips and tucks, it closes the gap on the SNES port in terms of audio and visuals while maintaining its dominance in the content and gameplay department.
You win.
Super Street Fighter 2 remains a classic and the Mega Drive port is a technical achievement, not so much from an audio-visual standpoint you see, but from the sheer audacity of cramming this monstrous arcade machine onto Sega's console, complete with every feature that the arcade machine had, something that even Mortal Kombat 2 on the platform could not boast. The game was unfortunately cursed by bad timing, launching not only against the rising star of the Mortal Kombat franchise when the Street Fighter 2 formula had become a little bit stale, but when this port launched in 1994, not only had we had Virtua Fighter pretty much changed the industry overnight a year before, with Tekken launching in Japanese arcades just a month or so after this port, but Super Street Fighter 2 itself had been upgraded just a few months before, with the Super Turbo upgrade adding super meters, alternate versions of characters and the Kuma. Speaking of which, that was a game certainly too big for the old Sega Genesis, but that hasn't stopped Daniel Mura from creating a homebrew version featuring Evil Ryu and Violent Ken, both characters from the Switch port as well as the Monitor Cyborg from the animated movie. Believe me, we will be following this one very closely. In any case, the Mega Drive port of Super Street Fighter 2 The New Challengers is still very much worth playing today. It's a faithful port of an outstanding game, squeezed to fit on Sega's 16-bit console. There may be better ways to play it today, but it's still an absolutely phenomenal port that is very much worth your time, whether you play it on original hardware, the version on the Mega Drive 2 Mini, or Master Hiryu's upgraded version. Are you a fan? Let us know in the comments below or join the discussion on the Sega Guys Discord. And if you've enjoyed this video, please give us a like and to subscribe and hit that bell for notifications to stay on top of all future Sega Guys content. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, we will see you on the Sega side.